tiger will attack us. But when we face the tiger, it's going to back down. So facing the tiger refers to things like taking steps out of your comfort zone. I'm going to stutter my order. I'm going to tell my friend that I stutter. I'm going to ask that stranger that the time. I'm going to give a speech, no matter what it is. You build up that confidence, becoming a confident stutterer.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. My name is Greg O'Grady, and I am a person who stutters and a co-host of Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering, along with my co-host.
And I'm Katelyn Mayo. I'm a future speech-language pathology student, and I'm Greg's co-host on this podcast.
Some Stutter Law mission is dismantling and rebuilding stuttering. Let's start listening. Some Stutter Law mandate is in the spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador humor, robust and frank interactive discussions. Some Stutter Law podcast aims to rebuild confidence and hope for today's and tomorrow's persons who happen to stutter by dismantling stuttering myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers.
The objectives of Some Stutter Law podcasts are supporting, raising awareness, and increasing understanding and acceptance of stuttering, providing people who stutter, their families, professionals, students, and the general public with current information, research, and resources about stuttering, and promoting advocacy and support for people who stutter.
Today's Some Stutter Law podcast welcomes Dan in brackets, Rossi. And Dan is a digital strategist from Toronto, Canada. Daniel enjoys helping others grow comfortable with their speech through his podcast, Stuttering is Cool and Stutter Social, the online global community he co-founded using group video chats. As a person who stutters since the age of 4, cartoonist and podcast, Dan Rossi shares his own experiences and methods for breaking out of the covert shell and becoming a person who stutters openly and confidently in all speaking situations, including giving presentations, dating, job interviews, and even dealing with those pesky, smirky waiters. So Dan, normally at this point we we normally ask you to share a little bit about your life as a person who stutters. However, I'm holding in my hand here your book that you wrote called "Stuttering is Cool: A Guide to Stuttering in a Fast Talking World." And Dan, I really appreciate your sense of your positive attitude towards stuttering. Dan, would you share with our audience your the reason why you're so positive? Because I've actually read the book. It's an excellent book, and I highly recommend it. So, do you want to share a little bit about this book, where it came from, where the idea came from?
Sure. And thank you for the compliments on my book. And also thank you for having me here. But at first I want to say I really love your theme song, the theme music. So as a jazz fan, thank you very much. So positive. I wasn't always, actually, and in fact, I'm more of a glass half empty kind of guy. But when it came to stuttering, you know what it's like, right? Growing up, with this idea, I can't express myself the way that I want, or people are laughing at me because of the way that I speak, or you avoid social situations, and it just compounds and builds upon breaking yourself down. And it wasn't until my mid-30s, I guess it was, when I learned through podcasting, through other podcasts about stuttering, the concept of it's okay to stutter. like that just shattered everything that I ever, was told, everything that I ever learned about stuttering. Um, and no, because I was always hiding my stutter. Once in a rare blue moon, I would tell a friend that I stutter, but it wasn't, I don't know, nothing came of it. It wasn't until, learning things like stuttering is okay. It's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's not your parents' fault. Um, and in fact, it's an advantage. Um, and and the concept of telling people that you stutter, that isn't something shameful to do, because I was always afraid to tell people, I stutter, because I thought it was my fault that I stutter, because I approached speech. I had speech therapy in the 80s when I was a kid, but I didn't quite understand it. I think it's because I thought it was a cure for stuttering. And my speech therapy was like smooth movement, take a deep breath and then speak slowly. And I had no patience for that. So I always had that idea, if I spoke, which is very strange, if I did speak slowly, did all that I was supposed to have done, then I would have been cured of stuttering, which doesn't make sense, logically. But to me, it did back then. And then, yeah, so I'm in my mid 30s, and suddenly I had this newfound, I guess, source of confidence, knowing that and experiencing people looking at me in a more positive light as I stuttered openly and acknowledged it. And also because I was okay with it, so they could be okay with it. Now, it took a lot for me to get out of my comfort zone, or it took quite some time. And what's what I'm looking for? It took a lot of practice, to practice stuttering openly, especially to strangers like baristas at a coffee shop. That would took a while for me to try not to avoid. It took a very long time. Um, and I would credit having started a podcast about stuttering really did help. Oh, and then also getting involved in the stuttering the podcasting community, because there I was at the podcasting conferences telling people, like, not only saying my name but saying, hey, and I also stutter and I produce podcasts about stuttering. So there was always that look of, wow, this guy's amazing, and look what he's doing, he's so courageous. And um, having women say that to me was like, hey, well then. you so it was quite the confidence boost. And then I realized, yeah, this isn't something necessarily a bad thing. No, yes, you can hate your stutter, you can feel awkward. There's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with being sad about your stuttering. After all, those are your emotions, right? And they are valid. But you need to survive too, right? You need a job. you need to order food. You need to go to the grocery store and ask, hey, where can I find the fish, or things like that. And getting out of your comfort zone, no matter how small the victory, it always gives you an extra boost, right? And then you want to do it again the next time. It's like, it's scary, but it's so worth it. I think I took the long way around that question to answer that question.
So Dan, in your book, you also talk about a confident stutter. Do you want to? I mean, a person who is a confident stutter, and perhaps you may have answered this in your sharing, but how, what was your definition of a confident person who stutters?
That's a very good question. I'm having a hard time thinking of the answer for a confident stutter. I kind of stopped using the word stutterer now, which is funny how people change. I wrote my book in 2013, and back then I'm like, there's nothing wrong with the word stutterer, and I'm going to keep using it. And then I grew more aware of, person first language, but I really don't care. But I'm not sure why I even brought that up to begin with. But and it's also hard to keep saying person who stutters, person who stutters, person who stutters in the same sentence. It's annoying. So yeah, again, long-winded answer. Confident stutter, yeah, just pretty much you're okay with telling people that you stutter. You're okay, to some degree, that you stutter openly. Maybe you don't, like, it doesn't bother you that much, like enough that you're hiding it, or you're gonna beat yourself over it. Although I'm not sure if that's the proper definition of confidence. It's just that you know that you can do it, so you do it. That's a crappy answer. I think I I think you know what I'm trying to get at. There's one that that, okay, stuttering is just something that I do, and I'm going to give that speech. I'm going to go for that job. And I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying? It's been a long day at work.
Mm. Well, Dan, like I think, I think what you're trying to say is that it's like it's a journey towards self-acceptance. I think,
Yeah,
people. I mean,
yeah,
we, we as people who stutter, it's not our fault because we know that, I mean, there's no cure for stuttering. It's a, neuro, 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 neurophysiological issue, issue, and so I mean, we actually do not know what causes stuttering, but it's not our fault.
yeah,
I mean, the theory has it may be socially related, environmental, genetics, but I think it's a journey of self acceptance. Would you agree?
yes. And while you were speaking, you made me realize, I think what I was trying to say is lessening the fears of stuttering openly, which is, laughed at still. Many people don't know stuttering when they see it, or when they hear it. Um, and I was thinking in my head, confident stutterer doesn't necessarily mean 100% confident, 100% fearless, because you could still be scared and still confidently walking towards the fire. Right. So that's, yeah, I think that answer took 10 minutes. It's funny. I went from someone who was speaking as little as possible to shut up now. You keep talking. My apologies to the people of Newfoundland.
And and I was one, and I'm thinking, Dan, because you're an author, you really have to promote your work now as a
Mm,
person who stutters. Do you find how do you control your anxiety when you're trying to promote your book? You know what I mean? Because we
yeah,
that takes a lot of promotional effort. Do you do like social media, in person presentations, or
yeah.
in terms of your anxiety?
Yeah, you're right. I really got to promote my book more. I am a one-person show, one-person shop, one-person team. Um, so yeah, so for now, I've been using social media to promote my book, um, and podcasts, coming onto podcasts. Um, and I did small little things like donating a copy of my book to a library on the off chance someone happens to, be searching for, books about stuttering. And I've progressed to creating comics out of the comic strip character that appears in my book. So because this is an audio podcast, so I'm going to describe that my book contains comics about stuttering, and it's a Fox character named Franky Banky, and that really took off. So I was really surprised by how well the book did, considering I didn't promote it much. Um, and I just realized I'm not answering your original question about the anxiety. Um, I would say I'm at a point where I'm no longer um, worried about stuttering openly because I'm promoting something about stuttering, so I better stutter. It would be to my advantage to stutter as much as I can. Um, the anxiety that I do feel will be more along the lines of, am I coming across as like a pushy salesman? Or, it has nothing to do with stuttering. It's more like, say on, across social media, am I posting too much? Am I self-promoting too much instead of being social? Am I, I do feel a bit self-conscious when I mention my book in certain situations. For example, would that be an example? Where, so for example, I made a book, a small little storybook for a Congress, Stuttering Congress that took place in Iceland in 2019, called The Saga of Franky Banky, a complete parody of the Icelandic, the Viking sagas. And at the back of the, and oh, sorry, this was the swag bag item for the Congress. And then at the back of the book, I have an ad for my book, which makes perfect sense. But I was like, I don't know, am I coming across as a, and all that stuff. So that's more where that anxiety comes from. I guess promotion anxiety is it the term?
So we've talked a lot about your book, but you have a podcast as well. And I
Mhm.
was wondering what made you want to start a podcast? Like what was the driving force behind that?
Yeah, I actually have two podcasts. The other one, which I have to, I'm long overdue. It's actually the Franky Banky podcast where I describe my comics. Um, so my Stuttering is Cool podcast, so that came first before the Stuttering is Cool book. That launched 2007, and that was right after I learned about, oh, stuttering is okay. It was right after that, and I learned about the NSA, the National Stuttering Association in the States, how they have a chapter system, the concept of support groups, the concept of having friends who stutter. Wait, what? And the year before that, I was searching for speech therapy because I wanted to get a new job. And I thought, well, I can't, stutter in job interviews. Way different thinking back then. But something stopped me from getting speech therapy after all. Aside from being cheap, I didn't want to pay. but but I didn't know what it was. I thought it was strange. I thought this is the strangest thing. And then when I heard about things like, support groups and such, I said, that's what I've been looking for. Having other people that share the same interests as me. Um, and uh, I know it's odd for someone who stutters to always have that dream of to have his own radio show. Um, and um, sorry, I just lost my my train of thought again. Yeah, so I decided I'm going to start a podcast, and at the time, I already had another podcast called Spudcast, which was a podcast about creativity. It was going nowhere, but here's a great illustration of how much my life changed and my perspective changed. Going back to your question on confidence stuttering, um, I would edit out my stutters on the Spudcast, and I would spend hours re-recording, editing out. And I thought to myself, and I kid you not, if I ever get interviewed on the radio, I can ask them to edit myself out or things like that, or take, do retakes over and over. When I launched Stuttering is Cool, I was like, I'm stuttering openly. And so I created Stuttering is Cool because I was searching for support groups in Toronto, which is very strange, a worldwide medium to find something in Toronto. I believe the Canadian Stuttering Association, at the time, I think they were having their conferences every 3 years, I think it was. So it must have been in between. And I didn't really see any activity. There was no support groups, nothing that I saw except for the Toastmasters group. So that's where I met Greg. And I think I remember starting or sending an email task. Is this still going on? And then I think it got revived a bit. And I realized I keep going off tangent. I'm so sorry. we gotta start doing this when I'm like 6 o'clock in the morning, where I'm more sharp rather than at the end of the day. I created Stuttering School because I wanted to share, also to share my newfound knowledge. Hey, stuttering is okay. This is great. Because at the time, 2007, Facebook just came out for everybody else to use. There were only a handful of Facebook groups about stuttering, all negative. MySpace was all the rage. And I thought I would love to tell people this whole new perspective, as well as the benefits of hearing other people who stutter and hearing yourself stutter. So my podcast was built around the idea of leave a message and I'll play it on the air. You hear other people stutter, you hear yourself stutter. And by doing that, I learned to catch myself from doing too many secondaries and too many avoidances. So altogether, this became one big stuttering support therapy kind of thing, I guess. And then the comics later on came, because I was always wanting to draw comics, so it was just a natural fit.
Dan, would you like to share about who exactly is Franky Banky in your book? The cartoon character.
Yeah, he's
you see this,
probably
yeah. You see, this is the reason why I really enjoyed your book, because it has a positive perspective about stuttering.
Mhm. Yeah, Franky Banky is actually a character I had already created way back, like way before learning stuttering was okay. You know, just long story short, I was looking for a cartoon character, and I thought, hey, this character kind of looks like he would stutter, which makes no sense. Like you can't tell that someone stutters just from their picture. But I chose this fox character, and yeah, and the positivity is my way of. And this probably goes back to your original question that I took 5 hours to reply, and had nothing to do with stuttering at the time. The positivity to teach that you don't have to suffer anymore. You don't have to worry about. I mean, we are going to worry about what other people think, but you don't have to beat yourself over it, over not having been fluent. I mean, I was there going, oh, I wasn't fluent. I said everything fluent except that one word, and it came crashing down. This is just the way that we speak, right? It's just like I have no control over my eye color, or anything else, but I do have control over how I react to things. And so you're asking, who is Franky Banky? I guess he would be modeled after me. I mean, I really didn't really breathe any. This is going to sound very bad to say. I didn't breathe any, or I didn't plan out a personality for Franky Banky. I just drew based on my experiences and any jokes that I could think up that were based on my experiences. But I'm currently working on a graphic novel, and really thinking hard. Okay, what are his weaknesses? What are his strengths? What's that X factor that can make a book seem interesting or a character seem approachable, and all that. Again, I'm sorry, I don't think I answered your question. It's been this pandemic has gone on for too long. I lost the art of conversation.
Oh no, you have, Dan. Don't worry. No, like you also use a character of a tiger in your story. There's so there like you use the you use the analogy of a tiger struggling with, I believe it's Frankie Banky, and the whole point being is like one of your characters may be a covert person who stutters, and the tiger, does this fight to struggle trying to befriend one stuttering. Do you want to elaborate on this? And
Yeah.
Katelyn, this this is the little tiger that I bought based on what Dan's story in his book, and so I've named him Amber Cove.
Oh, it's right. I remember when you told me that one, and I have a tiger
Want to share
character
that
painting
story?
right behind me. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that tiger named Tiger, Ti-Ger. So he's a block. Was actually a crowdsourced name. So back in, it might have been 2009, maybe 2010, when Twitter was a nice place to be. There was a very thriving stuttering community there, and so I asked, hey, here's a tiger character that I created. What should I call him? And it didn't take long for someone to say, call him Tiger, but with a block. So the tiger analogy of stuttering is the idea that the tiger. So let's say we take a man-eating tiger. Or a woman-eating tiger. I'm sure they like both. So we have or rather a ferocious tiger. Um, and that tiger represents our stuttering. And every time we turn our backs on the tiger, it's going to pounce on us. So every time we turn our back, we avoid switch words, deny that we stutter, things like that, like even avoiding social situations. So in other words, every time we let our stuttering hold ourselves back, or perhaps maybe our fears of being laughed at, which is completely legitimate fear. I'm not saying it's wrong to feel fear. It's the tiger will attack us, but when we face the tiger, it's going to back down. And then so facing the tiger refers to things like taking steps out of your comfort zone. I'm going to stutter my order. I'm going to tell my friend that I stutter. I'm going to ask that stranger that the time. I'm going to give a speech, no matter what it is. You build up that confidence, becoming a confident stutterer. And this whole story, which I probably should have explained first, came from when a friend of mine, Dr. Greg Snyder, who I mentioned throughout the book, in the States, he went to the zoo and you got to pay a fee to play with the baby tigers. And by the way, my friend Greg also stutters. And he noticed that every time he turned his back on a baby tiger, the baby tiger would try and take him down. He would pounce on him and try and take him down. But they're babies, so nothing happened. But every time that my friend faced the tiger, the baby tiger would back down. So that's when he came up with this idea of this analogy that when you show people you're a tiger, you have your tiger on a leash, right? It's under control, and not necessarily from a fluency perspective, more like you've tamed the tiger, right? You have a more positive perspective on your stuttering, and you're willing to show people, and then benefits come. So that's where that came from. And in the book, I have it. I introduced Tiger through a mixed martial arts UFC kind of fights, where it's Franky Banky fighting Tiger. And in the graphic novel that I'm drawing, it's an alternate origin story, so to speak, that is taking a long time to come up with a great plot that explains everything pictorially for kids. It's very hard to do. I think I missed a part 2 of your question. It was explain Tiger, and I think there was a part 2. Am I correct?
Oh no, Dan, because like I view it as a as a person who has always been a covert stutterer, which I have stopped now, which I'm trying to be open and honest about my stuttering. So it's almost like Frankie Banky is befriending, accepting. He's a her stuttering.
Yeah, and that's what the graphic novel will be about, how he befriends the stutter, which is such a hard concept to grasp, especially when you're someone who hates your stutter. And not sure if you've seen some of the wars across social media, whereas the acceptance crowd versus the no, I want fluency, stuttering is bad crowd. Don't tell me to accept my stuttering, which I completely understand. you could see it as a source of your troubles, or you could see people's reactions as a source of your troubles. Because the more I stutter openly, the more I can educate, and the less the newborn stutterers are going to encounter that. And I just remembered the part two to your question, which you didn't even ask me. It was more me thinking that I should mention, because you mentioned your Amber Cove tiger stuffed tiger doll. So back on the Twitter feed in 2010ish, when I was crowdfunding or crowdsourcing the name for tiger, I noticed all of my friends started buying tiger stuffed dolls because Greg was also part of that Twitter community. So I had one out to work, and a friend of mine in the UK had one. Another friend in Alberta had one, and all that. And the next thing I know, a cat character in a book a friend was writing was named Tiger without the dash. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that actually became a thing for a very short time. A woman in Germany, I forget her name, she knitted herself a tiger doll, a purple one, a very nice purple one. And then this is my tiger doll. So it's something that I'm hoping that I can revive in the future, whether it's a Franky Banky doll or a tiger doll. But it was always something that I always wanted to do, like maybe downloadable puppets or something. 3D printed, I don't know. And I remember, if you don't mind me sharing, when you first read my book, because I remember how much you were saying, like, I don't know if I can stutter openly, and now here you are going, here's my tiger. So it's pretty cool to see that. Now, I'm not implying if you don't stutter openly, for anyone listening, that you're inferior or anything like that, because I actually ran into that, which was very unfortunate. One of my listeners who I'd invited to come on to be interviewed on my podcast, and he says, no, I'm not worthy to be on your show. And I thought, what? He says, well, because you keep saying, you should stutter openly, but I don't. And I don't think that I should be on your show. And I said, no, you come onto my show and you can talk whatever way you want. But he still didn't want to come onto my show. And that was a big learning lesson in how I word things. So if you notice in my book, I'm always saying, if you want to, if you want to, because I myself, because I myself grew up with the idea of this is how you should talk. And I don't want to say this is how you should be talking, especially when I'm addressing the fears of social punishment. So that's something that, it's a very, very valuable lesson that I'm grateful that I had learned.
I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. Back at the beginning when we started, you mentioned about how stuttering can be almost an advantage in some ways. And I read a research article recently about finding the good. And I mean, that's, it's a big thing going around now, like talking about toxic positivity and trying to make sure you're not invalidating negative experiences and emotions with this stuff. But I definitely think that you can view stuttering as an advantage in some cases. You can view other things that are negative as an advantage in some cases. And so I'm wondering kind of what are some of the advantages that you see with your stutter or with stuttering?
Yeah, stuttering. You no longer need to scan ahead for words to switch. You could be more present in the conversation. When you practice making eye contact, you make such a strong connection, or at least I find that I'm more at ease, better than when I look away, because then you break that connection, and people may think you're lying, you're not telling the truth, because you can't look at me in the eye. Another advantage could be, depending on, whether you've you feel that you can, identify yourself as someone with a disability or not. Because I know stuttering, it's kind of hard, but you could, if you do, you'll have access to services, accommodations and all that stuff, whether it's in, universities, post-secondary, whatever. There's that. I know many people who are married and they stutter, so clearly it's not an issue. um, Another advantage would be, yeah, like how I had mentioned earlier, that people see you in a more confident light. Wow, in spite of talking like that, he's not perfect. He's perfectly fine. Um, and especially since we live in a weird society where people want perfection, but perfection doesn't exist. And we can't be perfect. Even when we try, we're not. That's why they airbrush celebrities on magazines, because they're not perfect. So there's that. And you do encourage, just through your actions, other people not to let their, whatever it is that imperfection is, whatever it is, that fear that they have, whatever their tiger is. So tiger doesn't necessarily need to be exclusively a stuttering metaphor. Whatever it is that is, it's your strength. It's can drive you to do things that fluent people may not ever dream of doing, giving a speech. That's one of those number one things, and one of my favorite things at a stuttering conference, when they do the open mics, because when the first timers go up to in front of this whole group of people, this auditorium of people, and they're saying, this is my first time ever speaking in front of a group, and they're in their 20s, their 30s, some are even older. And you see that look of, victory, after they have done it, because it was such a scary thing to walk up and then do it. So it definitely gets you out of your comfort zone. Another advantage is you're more empathetic. I safely assume, or rather, I safely overgeneralize. You're more, because you know what it's like to be singled out, right? Growing up. I'm sure if we had unlimited time, I can keep going like I did with all my other answers.
And I just wanted to ask one more thing.
Sure.
So one of my favorite questions to ask anybody that we have on the podcast, really. I guess I'm just wondering, kind of with all of the work that you've done with your book and your podcast and all of the kind of the ways that you've contributed to raising awareness for stuttering and stuttering acceptance, what have you found to be the most rewarding aspect of that?
I'll give you two. My creative outlet, because I always wanted to be a cartoonist and radio show host. The most rewarding is seeing the change that happens in other people, including Greg, and in young kids too. They love Franky Banky. The other day, a friend of mine in the States, were a long time ago, her daughter, I guess she was 12. She, she was too scared to do a video for school or something like that. And so her mother sent me the video, and she says, "Did you notice she's wearing a Franky Banky sticker on her jeans, because she wouldn't do the video without the Franky Banky?" And I think I sent her. Oh yeah, I sent her Frankie Banky birthday drawing for her birthday, and they have that. They have a special cabinet in their house of all the special things, throughout that daughter's life, and that drawing's in there. Now I'm like, I'm crying. I'm cutting up onions. So it's things like that, because like I said, I'm a one-person team. I'm some guy, behind his computer drawing cartoons and all that stuff. And I hardly ever receive feedback. But once in a while, when the feedback does comes, it's feedback. It's like great stuff like that. Although I have received hate mail in the beginning of my podcast for like, how dare you call your podcast Stuttering is Cool? So going back to your, toxic positivity, and but I really like the way that you had worded it. It was I think it was undermining people's emotions, because back then I had well intentions. Oh no, I'm telling you, you don't have to worry, but not realizing, this, and I didn't even know that toxic positivity was a thing until, well, the pandemic, when I saw it pop in my Facebook feed, and I'm like, people don't want to be positive. So it took a while for me to flip over my head to realize, that's what they're talking about. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, it's seeing the change that my work has done, because like I said, I never knew my book would take off. I thought people would demand their money back, and I almost didn't even finish the book. I said, this is garbage. Why would people want to read this? So I guess I didn't see the forest for the trees. Oh, and one more thing.
You
I
know,
highly recommend everybody to write a book.
you know, why would you recommend that, Dan, for all people who start
Yeah,
to write a book?
Yeah, a book or whatever creative outlet that you have. It could be video, it could be music, it could be whatever. But I guess in context of a book about your stuttering experiences, because you never know who you're going to reach. Um, and of course, it's a creative outlet, so that's fun. And you never know where it could lead, where it could grow to. I thought my podcast would last 4 episodes when I first launched it. No one's going to want to record their stuttering on a podcast. And I released episode 258, I think, last week, which isn't a lot considering I've been podcasting for about 13 years, but I don't put out episodes very frequently. And there I go. I lost my train of thought again. Oh yeah, writing a book. Yeah, you never know, because I ended up, and I'm not bragging or anything, but like I'm just surprised at like how one small idea, spawned off, interviews on, CBC radio, me doing Toastmasters, right? When I went to the Toastmasters, um, and me being invited to speak at the first NLS, me being asked to create the logo for the NLSA, and going to stuttering conferences. Now I could say around the world, if I can count 3 countries, that's around the world. But yeah, and now comics. I never knew I would make a book. Yeah, and it's always fun. It's just more steps out of your comfort zone, more fodder to even to help you disclose your stuttering. Oh, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, I went to a conference. Oh, what kind of conference? Stuttering conference. Oh, I spoke on the radio. I wrote a book about stuttering. Now suddenly you don't have to worry about stuttering, because now you got to prove that you stutter. So you better stutter openly, as you explain, how you went to this conference, in St. John's or Montreal or Toronto, over the weekend. So, and yeah, and then sharing yourself through an art form, whatever that creative outlet is another way of communicating. And I don't mean that from an avoiding stuttering point of view. It's another language, I guess, another form of connecting, but through your soul, and I get a lot of joy from sharing stuttering jokes, or sharing or not stuttering jokes, but I put some humor into some of the situations, that I was terrified of growing up. And I find joy in connecting with others through that comic, where they say, yeah, that's so funny, I went through the exact same thing, trying to make that phone call and all that stuff. And it's a comic story about making a phone call, and things didn't go well, and then Franky Banky ended up flooding his house because he kept stuttering too much on the phone, and they thought he was a broken cell phone call. And he says, no, your toilet overflowed. It's broken. I want my warranty. And all that stuff. I took the long way around again on that one.
So Dan, I mean, knowing that that you have been doing your podcast for a number of years now, and given now that some stutter law is brand new, we only started the some stutter law uh, in March. Do you have any words of wisdom for us?
To be honest, I've been taking cues from you guys. I'm like, they're doing very well. They're doing better than I am. Like I said at the beginning, yeah, I love the theme song. Um, and I like how you have your guests read the credits at the end. Yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. And well, I have a question for you. What does love mean? I tried looking it up on Google. I wasn't quite sure. Like, I don't know.
Katelyn, would you like to explain the name, where it came from?
For sure. So it is a play on some Newfoundland English dialect features because we have a very fun dialect of English here in Newfoundland. And so la it's just like a little expression added to the end of phrases. It's kind of means like look, almost like just kind of added to the end, like, oh, look over there, la. Like I can hear my grandmother's voice in my head saying it with her thick Newfoundland accent. It's hard to explain exactly what it means. It's just kind of thrown onto the end of phrases for emphasis and things like that.
So would it be like the Newfoundland version of a, like how we say a? It's
Kind of, a
kind
little
of,
bit.
but more in the
Yeah.
context
Yeah.
of look, like look
Yeah.
over there, or
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, Dan, the Dr. Paul D. Decker came up with the name, and Paul, Paul is an associate professor of linguistics at MUN. So he has been working closely with us, and so Paul came up with the name, but he Paul suggested a name, as Katelyn was saying, that Newfoundlanders can identify with, and it's almost like it is a saying that's going back for history, that some feed law, some weather law, some boat law, some fish and brews law.
I get it now.
Law, law is an intensifier. So I mean, some heat law, some so
Especially
more of a
today's heat wave.
oh yeah, definitely. So so it emphasizes some storm law sort of thing, But it is a definite a catchy name.
And it adds a little Newfoundland character, gives people an idea of where we're at. Gives people questions. They're like, what does that mean? And then they're talking about the podcast. So
and then we start saying it here in Toronto.
Yeah.
And take you guys off even more.
Yeah. You see, Dan, I mean, this is one of our main objectives with some stutter law is to make stuttering more, I mean, the general public in the province more aware of stuttering, and because I mean, stuttering is not like I talked about in Newfoundland and Labrador. Wouldn't you agree, Katelyn?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's definitely not talked about a lot. We recently have been on the local news a little bit here, which has been really cool. But I've had people reach out to me being like, I didn't know any of this stuff. Like this is the first. They said that's the first time they've ever heard anything about stuttering, like anything at all.
Wow.
Not like
they haven't
nothing.
Seen the King's Speech?
I mean, maybe some of them have, but like I've had people reach out to me and they haven't heard negative things, they haven't heard positive things, just nothing, which is crazy.
Yeah, wow. You know what? That brings back a memory. The early days of my podcast where I met somebody from, was it Malaysia? Where it says, there isn't even a word for stuttering. We don't have speech therapists here. Yeah. Who knew it was the same thing in parts of Newfoundland? Wow.
Well, definitely. So, but anyhow, Dan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
To be with us, Dan, and to share your thoughts. And thank you thank you very much for being a strong advocate and an ally for people who stutter.
Likewise. and thank you for having me on and tolerating my roundabout answers. I don't know what's wrong with me today, aside from I didn't sleep for 2 days, but that's probably why.
I think so.
Yeah.
So Dan, where would the public find your book now?
And see, I'm bad with promoting myself. I didn't even say where to buy it. What's wrong with me? Stutteringiscool.com or frankybanky.com. It's a new website that I launched in October of exclusively my Franky Banky comics. And the reason I did that, I know it's a bit dangerous to have two different brands, but I wanted to use Franky Banky to promote stuttering awareness. And I felt like I couldn't really do that with a website named Stuttering is Cool, because I felt maybe it was undermining, the emotions that we feel. Although now I'm starting to regret. I thought, well, you could say Stuttering is Cool, but yeah. But in any case, what's it called? Going on a tangent again. Yeah. There will be links on frankybanky.com as well, and I sell my book through Etsy. For now, I'm planning to expand. And my book is also available in digital format on Apple Books and on Google Play. And it's also been translated into French with thanks to the Association Begema Communication. So if any Francophone listeners are interested, you could buy the French version over on the abcbegema.org website. And it's called Bégayer C'est Cool. So you can always do a Google search and you'll find it.
Wonderful. Well, Dan, thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you, and I look forward to hearing myself ramble. Sorry about that. And it was great to meet you, Katelyn.
You as well.
Take care, Dan.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Katelyn.
Bye.
Bye. Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering, has so much to talk about. Let's start listening.
This has been an episode of Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. Some Stutter La is hosted and produced by Greg O'Grady, Katelyn Mayo, Emily Murphy, Dr. Paul DeDecker, and Luca Dinu. Some Stutter La is available on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. You can also check out the Some Stutter La channel on YouTube. To ask a question, send us a comment or suggestion, or just to get in touch, find us online at Some Stutter Podcast on Instagram or at Some Stutter La Pod. That's SOMESTUTTERLUH Pod on Facebook. And thanks for listening.